Let's be honest. When people talk about Iran, they don't really mean Iran. They mean what they have seen about Iran. They mean those poor women. Stay with me. Let's think fairly, rationally, and in context. In the US, women can't go topless in public, right? Of course not. That's illegal. In fact, women have been arrested for it. And in France, you can even get fined for wearing too much clothing, like a burkini. Some think the French are obsessed with this. So what's the right answer here? Who determines whether a shirt is enough or a scarf on your head is enough? Is freedom about showing more skin or about choosing what you wear without government interference? Most people who wear the hijab choose to wear it. And in fact, studies prove many wear it for comfort, even fashion, like this May 2022 study. If you saw the Muslim communities in Singapore or Dubai, you can notice this straight away. You can't claim to care about women's rights if you only support their choices when they look like your choices. Oh, and the hijab doesn't mean the burqa, which is still rare in the Islamic community and is getting less common. Many Jewish communities wear this too. Now, let's talk specifically about the country where a lot of the stereotypes stem from. Iran. Not the filtered headlines, but the real place. Yes, it has problems like anywhere else, but I can guarantee it's not what you've been sold. In fact, Iran's got some stats that might make certain Western countries blush. Over 60% of university students in Iran are women, which is more than the US, the UK, or even France. Iranian women have businesses, publish books, work in engineering, and are even members of parliament. Would an extreme country still allow this? But the only metric the outside world seems to notice? But they still have to wear a hijab. Well, you still have to wear a shirt, but you are allowed to make your own money. Are you oppressed too? Another uncomfortable truth is, Iran was interfered with. In 1953, the US and UK staged a coup in Iran. Basically, removed the leader they did not like. Imagine if Iran did that to the US. They overthrew a democratically elected leader, Mohammad Mossadegh. Why? Maybe it was because he had the nerve to nationalize Iran's oil, put his country first. That's when the Shah came back, backed by the West, draped in Armani suits, and celebrated in Vogue spreads. His regime was glitzy, westernized, but deeply oppressive if you weren't considered wealthy. People think the Shah's era was all freedom and feminism. Ask women who lived through it. Shirin Ebadi, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, said it clearly. Before the revolution, I had a job, but no legal rights. Divorce under the Shah was nearly impossible for the average woman, with mainly the wealthy women having more rights. But eventually, through protests, access to education improved. Legal rights, while still limited, improved in key areas like divorce and custody. Now, in Iran, a woman can initiate divorce for reasons like abuse, neglect, or infertility. Meanwhile, the media seems to only show voices of ex-Muslims, who used to be from mainly wealthy families that benefited from the times of the Shah. These are people whose families thrived under the Shah, flying private, throwing palace parties, while the average Iranian struggled to survive. Now they claim to speak for all Iranian women. The women on the ground, the teachers, the lawyers, the engineers, they're not begging for Western-style liberation. And what about the economy? Iran has problems, sure. But let's compare a few numbers. Iran's extreme poverty rate is under 2% thanks to massive subsidies. In the US, over 11%. In the UK, nearly 22%. Home ownership in Iran, over 70%, mostly mortgage-free. In the US, people are drowning in 1.7 trillion of student debt, and 70% of homeowners owe the bank. Homelessness, Iran's practically non-existent thanks to a strong family safety net. In the US, over 500,000 people are on the streets. Oh, and the child marriage narrative. More media fear than fact. Yes, the legal age for marriage is low in some rural cases, the same way in Christian Zambia or parts of Latin America are. But the average Iranian woman marries between 23 and 27. In Iran, under 1% of marriages involve girls under 15, and that's less than the Christian majority country Armenia or some US states. Between 2000 and 2018, over 300,000 minors were married in the United States. Mainly, that's Mississippi, Arkansas, North Dakota. Iran's teen pregnancy rate, around 5 per 1,000. The US? 3 times higher, triple the rate. Just think about that. Now, let's talk about culture and the change of culture. In the 1960s, Tehran was basically a British outpost, meaning it wasn't even Iranian culture, it was British culture. Western fashion dominated, English was everywhere. But that modernity was skin deep. Azar Nafisi, author of Reading Lolita in Tehran, described it perfectly. We were modern, but only on the outside. A society obsessed with appearances, disconnected from its own identity. To bring the hijab point back in context, it was always called veiling, and it existed in Iran long before Islam, just like how it existed in parts of Europe and Asia too. Ancient Persian women, aristocrats especially, wore veils as a sign of class. It was less about faith and more about status. So maybe the real issue isn't hijab itself, it's unfamiliarity and a lack of context. Does that make sense? This documentary isn't about glorifying Iran, it's about showing what's not being shown. There is brilliance, resilience, and a fight for dignity that doesn't get airtime. Let's stop confusing freedom with familiarity. Iran isn't perfect, but which place is perfect? You might think I am leaving out economics. Nope. Despite being outcasted in trade, Iran's GDP growth in a few years ago was nearly 6%. This is a country battered by decades of sanctions. While Western media plays reruns of protest clips from 2010, Iranian engineers, farmers, coders, and business owners are quietly moving the needle forward. The sanctions hurt, yes, but they've also forced Iran to develop its own industries, grow its own food, and rely on its own people. So what about the US as a comparison? Well, the US had a 2.1% growth rate that same year, and that's with full access to global trade and some of the world's richest imported resources. So in what metric defines doing better, as Iran's GDP growth was more impressive? Now let's talk about overall poverty and how the average citizen feels. In Iran, fewer people live below the poverty line compared to many Western nations. There are subsidized essentials like bread, fuel, and electricity. That means families eat. That means kids stay in school. That means the average Iranian doesn't have to choose between heat and rent. In contrast, 11.5% of Americans live in poverty, which translates to millions of people. In the land of billion-dollar companies and endless consumer choices, there are mothers choosing between bread and gas. Entire families getting evicted over a $600 emergency bill. And in the UK, the picture is even bleaker. More than 10 million people live in poverty, including 4.2 million children. In one of the wealthiest nations on earth. But wealthy for who? A lot of people cannot even afford to have their own home, which many countries consider a human right. In Iran, over 70% of people own their homes, most of them outright, with no mortgage. That means not living under the shadow of foreclosure or rising rent. They're part of the social safety net that has helped the country survive crises, war, sanctions, inflation. And when it comes to homelessness, Iran has virtually none. That's not an exaggeration. It's the result of a cultural and familial structure that doesn't let people fall that far. Multi-generational households, deep community ties, religious mandates around charity and care. Compare that to the US, where more than 580,000 people are homeless on any given night. So ask yourself, who's failing their citizens? The next bunch of facts will shock you. Iran is ranked among the top 4 countries globally for engineering graduates. That's not just rote learning or theory, it's unique inventions. It's this same drive that produced the PARS robot, a drone ambulance designed by an Iranian scientist to rescue drowning victims. When first responders fail, this machine flies out across the sea to drop flotation devices to those in distress. It was inspired by a single line in the Quran about saving a life being equal to saving all of humanity. Ancient values, modern tools, and yes, Iran ranks second in average IQ globally at 106.63. Based on a 2024 dataset of over 1 million international test takers, ahead of nations like Japan, Germany, and Canada. That kind of brainpower doesn't vanish because a country mandates headscarves. Again, Iran has its flaws, but so does America. Like many would say, Iran isn't hypersexualizing minors in media or turning every teen influencer into a commodity. Not everything is a product. The reality is this: Iran is a place with its own complexities, its own triumphs, and its own struggles. It's a country striving for progress amid external pressure, navigating its own path between tradition and modernization. Yes, it has its flaws, like any country, but it's far more than the narrative painted by soundbites and headlines. Iran may not fit neatly into the narratives we've been taught to believe, but maybe that's the beauty of it. In the end, the truth is always more nuanced than the headlines.